I belong to you. I belong to you. Do just what you want. You're the one I trust. And I always be around when I need some loving, baby.
Hello, friends and fans of Trotec Laser. Welcome back once again to another live stream with Trotec on Fridays. This week is going to be a really exciting week, and I'm interested to get your guys' questions and hellos pouring in the chat here. Gary, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, hello to Laura Sando. Oh my goodness. Look, everyone's got to give me, I'm going to apologize right out the gate here because I'm working with Tim and with Laser Dave today. So not only am I getting outclassed on the laser front, but I'm getting outclassed on the charm front, on the, I'm besieged on all sides for everyone today. So if I'm a little bit tripping over my words, you'll have to forgive me, but I'm very excited to be introducing my two co-hosts. But very first and foremost, just want to say hello to everybody watching in the chat. If you're watching this later on YouTube, welcome and hello. So glad you could join us. I think it's going to be a really great stream. I am joined today, as always, by Tim. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. It's a nice Friday.
Awesome. And the man, the myth himself, Laser Dave. How are you, sir?
Good. How are you doing today?
Really good. Glad you could join us.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Hey, thanks for taking the time. Tim, you were mentioning before we got started about how you were learning, like part of the journey you took in learning photo engraving was actually in watching Dave's videos. I think you and everybody else, pretty much, if I'm honest, like between Mike Clark and Laser Dave, that's the only, and I mean, of course, Lev, I'll give Lev credit. He's in the back end also helping us to run the stream, so I definitely better do that. But definitely between Dave and Mike, I mean, I don't know if I would know how to use a laser at this point, if not for these two guys. So I will say, Dan, Cheryl, Gary, thank you everyone for joining. I'm just going to give people a few minutes to hop in, but I'll remind you all, if you have any questions at all today, specifically about photo engraving, but about anything Trotec, throw them in the chat, please. These two guys really know their stuff. It is a great chance to get to chat with two people who are Trotec experts through and through. And also, you know, I really think photo engraving is one of those topics that it's very difficult to cover off every little nuance in an hour, and I'm sure there'll be stuff that we'd like to get to next time or in a future video. So if you'd like to see more of this, definitely, you know, let us know. We always love to see it either in YouTube comment or here in the stream in the chat. It's always great to hear that you guys are excited. But all right, I think I will probably throw it over to my two co-hosts here. Tim, how was your week, sir? What did you get up to this week? Anything exciting going on?
Yeah, this week it's all been photo engraving. All photo engraving, taking out sheets of anodized aluminum and just going crazy. Just every single setting I can think of, trying to see what every tiny setting will do to the aluminum. It's been a crazy week.
I honestly, again, you know, I've had some really great training, but photo engraving is still one of those things that if a customer comes in and would like to see a demonstration of that, it's one of the areas that I still don't feel completely 100% confident. I feel like, it's like you said, every little tiny tweak to the settings feels like it makes a world of difference. So, I mean, you found some good stuff for today, though. You're ready to go.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It's a fat all week.
Dave, how about you, sir? I mean, I know you have a longer history with photo engraving and laser engraving. Did you want to, I don't know if there's like, listen, we could spend an entire hour talking about Dave's history in the business and everything he's done with Trotec, but, you know, do you want to tell us a little bit about, you know, how you got started and your time with Trotec, that sort of thing? Who are you, if someone hasn't had the pleasure?
Yeah, I'm David Stevens. I've been working in the industry now for 22 years. And well, it's funny is photographs was one of my early passions with lasers. It's one of those things that was so complex, so difficult. And early on, especially, you know, 20 plus years ago, very complex method of producing an image onto materials and stuff like that. And so I took it wholehearted, and I have probably put 3,000 to 5,000 hours into photographs, developing software, developing technologies, and helping the laser industry improve the actual algorithms and pulsing algorithms to actually make lasers far more user-friendly and easier to do, so that it's a lot more simple process to this day. So I have really understood every detail from how the laser pulses and how the photographs actually achieve, all the way to working with materials, lenses, and stuff like that. So any questions anyone has when it comes to photograph, I should be able to handle it, because I probably come across it. And I've done photographs on everything, like you say, anodized aluminum is what we're covering today, but I've actually put a photograph on a seed, a large seed bean pod, and then pulsed through the outer husk, stuck it in the ground, and then grew it, and then the photo came up out of the ground. So that's probably one of my more unique photographs.
Wait. Hold on. No, you know what? I'm just gonna leave it there. If people are, you know what? That's okay. We're gonna have
True story.
Google and I have an appointment after this stream is over. So, I mean, again, big topic, but what would you say it is about photo engraving that makes it so appealing, and then both also, so tricky with the laser? What is it about photo engraving particularly that makes it so, a little bit perhaps more technical, let's say, than your standard application?
Well, in my opinion, it's the fact that it's the permanence. I mean, we're actually taking a material and we're pulsing a photograph into it, and whatever that material is. And that's what I really like about lasers. There's really no limitation to that material. Yes, we printed it, we put it on paper, we developed it onto film, but having the substrates of being able to actually etch it into it, using the contrast from the difference from fire and heat to actually produce a photograph into a substrate is unique. And yes, it is more difficult, but because it adds that high perceived value, uniqueness, it's generally loved and liked.
Agreed. It is, without a doubt. I mean, in my limited, sorry, really quickly, yes, Seth, this absolutely will be available once the stream is over. It'll be on the US Trotec Laser channel and the Canadian Trotec Laser channel. So if you search it up afterwards on YouTube, you can rewatch it as much as you like. I think you're absolutely right, Dave, 100%. And I think to add to what you're saying, it always struck me as similar to tattooing, a portrait, where some of it is biochemistry, right? The human brain, like, as soon as there's even a slight weirdness in a portrait or in the representation of a face, our brains just tweak on it immediately, right? Even if we don't mean to, we just sort of catch it right away. So it's one of those things that if somebody doesn't do it really super well, or if you don't necessarily know, quite the balance right out of the gate, don't get discouraged. Certainly, it's something that you can work with, but you know it when you see it. Like, great photo engraving really pops, and it is kind of one of those really standout applications. We have I don't know if you'll be able to see it, everyone, but the Ninja Turtles that you've seen in the background of our stream setup here today, we have this great image that was originally done by James, our salesperson James, from the Ninja Turtles movie. And there it is right there. Thank you, Lev. It is super, super high detail, and regardless of, if someone's coming to visit our showroom for wood engraving or for part marking, whatever it might be, they still stop and check out this application that's hanging right by the door. I mean, it is just a real, it's one of those things that if you were going to start up a general engraving store today, I would recommend always to have a nice photo engraving near the front, regardless of what your preferred choice of material is. Particularly, as Dave says, because you can do it on just about anything. Would you be able to explain to us, though, Dave, this is something that I feel like I have a general sense of, but for anyone watching, what is it about anodized aluminum that makes it such a great choice as a material for photo engraving?
You're talking to me?
Mm-hmm. Sorry,
oh,
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Anodized aluminum is a unique material because it's an electroplated process that actually places a coating under the surface of the metal. And it has a unique property because when the laser engraves it, it doesn't actually remove the coating. And the coating is basically a hard ceramic coating, and it's electroplated onto the surface. And when the laser hits it, at least a CO2 laser, what happens is it actually bleaches the color off. And so we get the hard anodization, which protects the soft aluminum, But then when a laser hits it, it gives us that bleach effect. So we get a high contrast black and white or purple and white or whatever color combination it is. Typically, it's a white response from the laser. And so it gives us that kind of luster and that sheen of metal, but it doesn't require special lasers or special chemicals to achieve that photograph. And you get that high contrast, and it achieves incredibly high detail, unlike a lot of materials.
Yes, that was always what was explained to me as the kind of the most appealing part of the anodized aluminum is you can get incredible levels of detail. I know, as I said, James, when he very first did this sample, he actually hung a small magnifying glass next to it on the wall of the showroom so that you can come up and, check it out really close up and make sure that, you can see all that little tiny detail. I think Tim is just getting set up on the back here. You can see that we're using a really cool 400 this morning. I don't know if anyone will be familiar with the little camera housing that you see there on top of the lid, but maybe we'll just leave that for a future video. Just, wet everyone's whistle with some cool stuff that might be coming down the pipe here. While we're getting that set up, I guess, not to put you too much on the spot, Dave, I apologize, but, what would you say are maybe some of the things for someone like me who's like a photo engraving novice, let's say? What are some of the really big things to keep an eye out for, or what are some of the big things to keep in mind, when you're preparing your file originally? I know one of the things that Mike always mentioned to me, for example, was, he says crap in, crap out, but basically what he means to say is that, like, if you start with a poor quality photo, or a pixelated photo, you are going to see that representation in the laser, and it's the higher quality photo you can start with, the better, always.
Yes. I use the same kind of analogy. So garbage in, garbage out is the one.
Much better. Thank you.
No, that is the true case. If you have a poor quality photo, it's blurry, it's low pixelation, it's low resolution. What you see is what you get. It's the whole WYSIWYG, and you can't take a poor quality, low resolution, low light, blurry photograph and expect it to engrave any better. That's just not going to happen. So the absolute key first thing is make sure you have a photo that's high enough resolution. Also, depending on what size you're going to engrave it. If you're going to engrave a small, low resolution photo on a very small keychain or something, you'll be just fine. However, if you want to do like the Ninja Turtles there, where it's very large, the larger you go, the more resolution you need. It's called pixel density. And that data is necessary in order to engrave it larger. Just like you would need to print a large or high resolution photo, you need a high res photo to print it larger. It's the same basic concept. In addition to that, good quality lighting, the better the photograph is going to produce a better image. Another one that I really like is high dynamic range, or HDR photographs, because it eliminates a lot of the main issues like the real light areas and the real dark areas, and brings the midtones to kind of the center or forefront. And the laser loves this. It gives us a much higher quality output photograph. So if you're just starting, you're a novice in the industry, start with an HDR photo. Most phones will even shoot them this day, or just download one and start practicing with that, so you have a good understanding of exactly what it's supposed to look like. And this way, when you put an image that's not quite the same, you'll kind of understand the difference.
Absolutely. And you make a really good point there, I think, which is to say that you don't necessarily need, so if it's a photo that you yourself are taking, you don't even necessarily need a super great camera. These days, your telephone probably shoots a better quality photo than most sort of, basic off the shelf cameras. And realistically, I mean, we use them for shooting a lot of our videos here at Trotec, just because at this point, it's so much simpler and, cost accessible. But we mentioned it, also so you can have a very frank, if you were to have a customer come to you with a photo and want you to do a photo engraving, just so that you can have a frank discussion with them. I mean, the laser, to Dave's point, is able to reproduce, basically one-to-one of whatever the photo is onto, whatever that material is. And while that's an incredible strength, it also means that, if the photo happens to be a little older, or happens to need a bit of, perhaps post-processing or pre-processing, in this case, before you do the laser engraving, that the laser is not going to be able to handle that necessarily, all on its own. You're going to have to do some pretty drastic processing to the photo ahead of, throwing it in the laser. Joey, so yeah, it depends on your cell phone, certainly. But more modern cell phones, for whatever reason, they tend to compete a lot on the quality of the camera as opposed to the quality of a lot of the other aspects of the phone. And so, I have a unbeatable. It's incredible. There's a million tutorials on YouTube about photography, basic photography principles, light and shadow, and all those things. There's a lot of ways to become a better photographer for free. I can speak from my own sort of experience there. When I started at Trotec, I was a terrible photographer. Definitely investigate those resources, and all of that will then help the final product that you have in the laser engraving. Tim, how are you doing on your side, bud? How is the preparations going?
It's going well. It's going well. Just making sure that everything is up and running and in the perfect condition to run.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
No problem.
I know, Tim, you prepared like a little bit of a presentation for us today, if I'm not mistaken.
I did.
A run through.
Yeah. Just this short demo through how to get from point A to point B in photo engraving.
Awesome. I mean, if you feel good, should we toss over to that? Do you feel okay?
Yeah. Just
awesome.
Setting everything up here.
Yeah, please. I will mention again really quick for anybody who's joining us now, if you have any questions at all, we're so happy to have you here. Please toss them in the chat. If we don't grab them right away, know that we are certainly setting them to one side, and we will probably have little question breaks as we go along. Very certainly at the end of the stream, we will have a nice break for kind of Q&As and stuff from Dave and from Tim. So if there's anything you want to know about Trotec, specifically something about photo engraving, please don't hesitate to toss it in the chat here. We would be really, really happy to answer that for you. So Seth mentions upscaling services. A lot of upscaling services these days that can use AI to increase the image size. It's not perfect, but can make for a better baseline for rendering the image. That's very true. Also, and I'm sure Tim is going to show you a little bit of this in his presentation this morning, but there are certain sort of, let's say, tweaks, whether it's in Corel or in Photoshop or Photo Paint, whatever it might be, that you're going to do to the photo ahead of doing the engraving that in my head always look slightly insane. I mean, anytime you have like a reversed photo or a reversed image where everything, it's like the negative, it always looks a little bit scary, but trust the process. I promise it's going to come out great at the other end. But you make a really good point, so thank you for mentioning that. As you say, especially with somebody who has an older photo. Dan mentions most phones are pretty good resolution. Be aware that the front camera and the rear camera are usually different. Yes. Typically, if you want to take a really good quality photo, this is the one that you want, not this guy. The selfie camera is there. They're great, but for a super high resolution image, usually your back camera is going to be the go-to. I wanted to ask you, Dave, so when you first started doing photo engraving on a laser, you said that you helped contribute to some of the algorithms, some of the way that it's actually processed on the back end. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about that? I mean, what was that first laser that you ever did photo engraving on like?
I worked many years ago for a company called Universal Laser, and when processing photographs, lasers they couldn't pulse as fast back then. They didn't have the ability to manipulate an image onto a photographic image onto a piece of material as effectively. So over the years, developing the accuracy, and that's the key, is understanding every pulse and how it's going to pulse. If you're going to bring in a color image, and how is it going to interpret that so that it pulses directly into the material, so that the pulses spread out. And so it's kind of like an old newspaper print. If you look at it, it gives what's called a halftone pattern. And that pattern is more dots for darker areas, less dots for lighter areas, unless the material needs to be inverted. And that's another question I get all the time, is when do I need to invert the material? Basically, if the engraving is going to turn lighter than the surface, then you need to invert it. If it's going to go darker, then you do not. So something like wood is one of the materials I would always suggest everyone start with if you've never done a photograph, because it's very forgiving. But ultimately, I developed it so that we sped up the speed of the laser, and then also changed the algorithm so that when it saw a photograph, it interpreted those dark and those light areas and spread the pulses apart so that it fired more accurately to produce a more realistic photo. And with time, increased technology with computers, processing speeds and stuff like that, the lasers then got faster and faster so they could turn off and on quicker, so that we in essence got a better photograph. Because basically a laser fires a pulse, it puts a divot into that material, and then it stops, and then it fires again. And you have to do this incredibly fast in order to achieve a realistic photographic image. And that's where a lot of the research and development went into improving this media.
I'll definitely want to come back to asking you about later on is, so then, in speaking particularly about like the Trotec tubes and why, a Trotec laser is so well suited to this. But I do want to toss it over to Tim, because I know, like everybody else, I am pretty excited to finally learn a little bit about how to actually do this properly. So Tim, please take it away, sir. It's all yours.
Oh, definitely. All right. So, well, like Dave mentioned before, the first and most ideal step that everyone should take is to try to find a photo with the most high definition. It's just, again, if you put in a photo with a very low resolution, you're going to get an outcome with a very low resolution. Doesn't matter how many DPI you try to throw into the photo, it's still not going to come out as great. I also like to try to find as much contrast between colors as possible, just so I have that color separation. And that way, when you do grayscale the image, there is a very clear differentiation which color is which. That way, the laser can work best to know exactly when to engrave at its most and when to skip over that. So another good point was brought up was when to know how to engrave, sort of when to inverse the color. So since today we're going to be engraving on anodized aluminum, and whenever you engrave on anodized aluminum, we get a white and gray finish. So that would be the best time to invert something, when you know that what you're going to be engraving is going to be having an outcome of a white color. So for today's example, I'm going to be using a photo that comes already pre-installed when you download Ruby with our machines. It's this trial photo of a girl and her cat. Absolutely adorable. And this image, the moment you drop it into Ruby, what Ruby will do is automatically grayscale the image. Now, this is great because you don't need to take this into Photoshop, you don't need to take it into Illustrator or Corel. You can do the grayscaling right there and then within Ruby, which is absolutely incredible and very, very easy to do. The moment you get the photo in Ruby, you can click on the photo, and on the right-hand side here, we can see its dimensions. So we can see its width and height. We could also see the position that it's in. So we're going to be using the top left of the photo to coordinate it. And at the very top right of the photo itself, we see a little pencil icon. So this little pencil icon opens up a little tonal graph for us. So we're able to play with the gray and white image here. So when I try to press anywhere on this line here, what it will allow me to do is to change the tone of the image. So I can get a bit of a darker black, and I could also get a bit of a lighter gray. Now, since this photo is already tuned to have the perfect sort of, gray to it, I'm not going to play around with it too much. But ideally, what you're looking for is a photo with very little contrast between the blacks and whites, just so you know that there's not too much overburning in one area and not too much left over in the other. Because we're also going to be inverting this image too, to change the colors so we get all of our blacks in this photo to be engraved. So after I'm done editing, I'm going to press on the apply button. That's going to save the photo for me. And to invert the photo, also another just click of a button, we're going to head over to the right of the screen, and where we have this half black and white circle, we're going to click on that, and that's going to invert our image. So now, every portion that is black is going to be engraved, and every portion that is white is going to be skipped over. And after I'm done setting this up, I will head up to the top right of the screen, I'll press Create Job, and that will bring me over to the Preparing tab of Ruby. And this is now the laser bed of my Speedy 400. And I can see exactly what the machine is, what it's doing. So right here in the corner, I have my crosshair set up perfectly for where the material is. So I'm going to take my photo and just move it into that space there. I'm also, at the same time, I'm going to select the material that I've chosen. So right now it's set to the wood pine material. We're not engraving on wood pine today. We're going to be engraving on anodized aluminum. And when I press on anodized aluminum, if I had already preset the material in my material database before doing this, I should have all of my settings already saved here, and which I do. So today we're going to be using a 120 watts 400. So I have my power set to 27. I have my speed set to 80. My DPI set to 600. So that means every inch that the laser is going to be crossing will be firing 600 dots in that inch. We could also play with a bit of a higher DPI of 1000. Once again, in that 1 inch, there's now going to be a more condensed dots amount. So within that 1 inch, there's going to be 1000 instead of 600. But I found for the best results, at least for anodized aluminum, I found for my case at least, is that 1000 usually works works well, but 600 comes out with a bit of a better results. I get a bit more of that detail that I'm looking for. Then, so after all this is set and done, get to the best part. Push to laser. Going to turn on my exhaust here. And so today we're going to be working on the run on Ruby machine too. So on the run on Ruby machines, I have a little screen placed on the right so I can actually see what jobs I've queued up. But thankfully, I could also do it right here on my screen as well. I'm not actually physically connected to this machine. I'm doing it all through the web. And when I'm done and ready to go, all I have to do is just press the play button. Running a bit into a bit of an error. Interesting. Okay.
I love. You can always tell that Lev is in the back end because he'll make the screen with the error larger so that he can read it too, so then be able to help us troubleshoot it on the back end. Huge shout out to him. Thank you.
All right. There we go. Okay. Yeah. Should I make a quick side note? So if it's not directly connected to the laser, I can queue up the job, but I have to actually press the play button on the laser itself. Quick side note.
That's a good point. I actually didn't know that. While that's running, I had we had some great questions here in the chat, and I had one or two I want to throw to you guys. So first and foremost, in referring to the DPI and also the balances that you're doing, like you had the tonal curve up there in Ruby, Tim, but that's similar to the sort of tonal curves that you would get in, let's say, Photo Paint in Photoshop, the same sort of tool, right?
Yeah.
Is there a difference between, let's say, like a tonal curve and like the brightness contrast adjustment, let's say you get in Corel? Like, does the tonal curve give you perhaps like a more fine grain adjustment that you can make, or would they all work, relatively the same?
I'd say before you bring it into Ruby, so let's say you're bringing in a colored photo right out of the gates, if it's an HDR image, odds are you already have the best image selected for the grayscaling, because the HDR especially on your phone camera, will automatically select which photo does look best. So in terms of brightness changes, you can always make those quick edits within the software that you're trying to use. Once again, Ruby is not as much of a design program, but a very good tweaker. So this is why when we put into this program, it can adjust small things here and there, but ultimately the very large and vast changes that you're going to need to make with a lot of designs still would need to be done in Corel and in Illustrator and other programs like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to a quick question for Dave also, because it sort of ties into what you were saying earlier about the speed with which the laser can pulse and the ways in which that ties into the DPI and the quality of the image and this sort of thing. How much does wattage factor into your ability to get so like Tim was saying, you really want to tune that balance between the darks and lights. You don't have too much contrast, but you have enough that it's going to be clear, et cetera, et cetera. How much does a higher wattage or a lower wattage factor into your ability to get that clarity and make those two things kind of, pop off the material?
It's actually huge. When it comes to wattage, it can be the biggest benefit or difficulty when it comes to processing photo. Believe it or not, high wattages on anodized aluminum are the most difficult thing to do because it's a very low power material. So what that means is the laser has to fire considerably faster to turn off and on to get the appearance of less power, and that's how lasers work. It's not like a hose where you throttle back the power in. So when you say I want 30% power on 120 watts, you're getting 28 watts. You're actually telling the laser to fire quicker to get the appearance of less power. So lower wattages can actually produce better and more controllable image quality on something like anodized aluminum, where materials like woods or something, you would want higher wattages because they require more power to get that same image. And so just because you have high wattage doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing, especially on something like anodized aluminum. As Tim probably found, it's very, very a tight balance between the best possible setting because he has so much power. Now, Trotec fires the laser so much faster than most lasers out there, which allows us to still do that, but it is more difficult to control on a higher wattage laser versus a low wattage laser.
So that's really interesting. See, I'm ashamed to say that, 4 years into my career here with Trotec, I never realized that it was actually just the power differentiation is actually just done through the speed with which you're pulsing the laser and not through like a throttling back of the. That makes sense, though. Of course.
Correct. Each pulse the laser fires is, in this case, is 120 watts, and no matter what you do, it's always 120 watts. And so we may be pulsing 5,000 pulses an inch, but every single pulse is turning on and off quicker or longer to get the appearance of more or less power. It's the same intensity. It's just duration of each pulse that determines the full power. This is why it's more difficult to control a high wattage laser on a sensitive application.
That makes a lot of sense.
I agree.
I mean, let me ask you, Tim, like in the, in using the 400, like I assume, like Dave was saying, that's what you found in trying to find that balance that, I mean, I know you were testing on anodized all week, but, what was the hardest thing to find? Was it the prep? I know, again, Ruby had the photo, pre-prepared, but like, is it that tonal balance? Is it the right wattage? I guess it's a combination of everything. I mean, what was the thing that you struggled with the most this week?
So for me, at least, it was finding the correct power, just the right amount of power. And especially since every machine has a bit of a different speed when it comes to moving side to side. So right now, the test we just did with 400, so this is the results that I was able to achieve. I'm not sure how this is going to come across looking on the screen, but this is the result I was able to achieve with the Speedy 300 with 100 speed, 40 power, 600 DPI. And this is the equivalent of that on the 400. So the image is much, much brighter. And I believe it might be because the speed was just I think it was just either too fast and it's not really comparing too well to the 300. But the result came out looking much better on the settings that I had found on the 300 than me just equivalently trying to match them on the 400. So you got to keep testing, finding the right setting just specifically for this machine.
One small little hack too, and it was just a very small thing. When you're doing tests, and you saw it there because Tim knows what he's doing, always, if you think of it, and more this is a reminder to myself, if I'm honest, use Ruby to write the power and speed that you used while doing the engraving underneath the engraving itself, so that later on you're not trying to remember to yourself which one exactly was this. You can literally, it takes 2 seconds to write it in exactly. Ignore the sticky note.
Don't ignore the sticky note.
Yeah, that's right, actually. But that is just a small little thing that makes it so much easier when you come back later, a day later, a week later, over the weekend, whatever it is, to be able to quickly and easily get back to where you were, and also to show customers, right? I mean, if you have a particular laser, you can do kind of a range of different, the same exact image as Tim did there, right? The same exact image, but using multiple settings, and then show them all to your customer and sort of say, which one of these looks, the closest to what you'd like to see. Another quick question we're getting in the chat here that I'd like to throw over to Dave. So there was a question originally, I believe it was from Joey, but I could be mistaken. Yes, thank you, love. Asking if it's easier with Ruby than CorelDRAW to do photo engraving. So I'm curious, just right off the hop, what your take is, and then also, sort of in terms of software preference, what do you think? Is there a better software, or is it just sort of, use whatever you've got to hand, basically?
Yeah, CorelDRAW is not a photo editor. Yes, it has a little bit of photo editing tools, but it is a vector graphic software that will work with photographs. Ruby is going to work just as well with photographs. The histogram that Tim showed earlier is basically this similar thing that you can do in CorelDRAW. CorelDRAW gives you brightness, contrast, intensity. I don't like playing with those as much because it's the extremes. When you play with the histogram or adjustment, it gives you the controllable of the middle tone ranges, which is what you really need to do. I don't particularly like CorelDRAW for working with photographs. In my opinion, it does not handle photography very well at all. If you're going to incorporate them into another design and cut with it and stuff, it works okay. But I will typically use a photo editor if I want to do extreme editing, like Photoshop is my favorite. If you don't have it, Corel Photo Paint is okay. Ruby does not because Ruby takes the photograph in from that point you don't need to do anything. CorelDRAW would do nothing for you unless you want to crop it or size it. And again, CorelDRAW does not do a very good job at that because the problem is when you export a photograph out of CorelDRAW, it's not that it don't look fine on the screen. They change it to where it doesn't respond the same on lasers. I have found when I export it out of something or make an adjustment in, say, Photoshop, I get a different response when I engrave it when I've edited in Photoshop versus when I've edited in CorelDRAW, because again, Photoshop is designed specifically for photographs. Same with Corel Photo Plane. So if you are going to edit a photograph, do it in a photo editor. If you're going to do modifications, cleanups, and stuff like that. If that does not require any photo editing or cropping or something like that, then you don't need to use any of those softwares. That's the benefit of Ruby. You bring it right in. You can make minor adjustments to the lightness and contrast using what Tim just showed, and then send it right on down, because you're taking that original data, bringing it right into our software. And you're not using a third-party software like CorelDRAW, which isn't great with photographs, and then exporting that back out, which kind of changes the pulsing or the patterning so that it outputs a little bit different to the lasers.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, certainly, we are fortunate to have, let's say, Mike, and he was a Corel certified trainer at one time, so he has been a lifelong sort of Corel fan. But I'm with you, actually. I've been a lifelong Adobe person just by virtue of, that was the first one I was taught. But from an Adobe point of view, I would never say use Illustrator to work on photos. I would always use Photoshop, because Photoshop, as you say, is specifically the photo editing, software kind of thing, right? A quick question here from Craig. Are there different types of dots or effects used? So I'll throw that over to Tim, but in terms of, when you're breaking down the DPI, it's not quite like I'm not sure how to, I liked your analogy earlier, Dave. It is very much like a newsprint, where it's the density of the single dot that's being applied rather than different types of dots and effects, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but how it's applied can be different, and there are different dot patterns, which I'm sure Tim will be showing, which we have the capability of doing. So it's more of a pattern of dots or a random pattern of dots. And there are a lot of different algorithms built right into Ruby that we can get a different effect by turning some different modes on.
Absolutely. When we're maybe I'll toss it back to Tim, but I guess, are we referring to things like Stucky versus Jarvis versus, so it's the way that the laser is marking onto the image, or onto the material, pardon me?
Yeah, I can answer that. The order dithering versus Stucky versus Jarvis. Yes, those all are going to produce a different effect. Basically, it tells the laser to interpret the dot pattern onto the material differently. Order dithering is literally a dot pattern in a pattern, so you get very distinctive black and white dot patterns, and under a microscope you can literally see it's like a grid. Where the other Stuckies and Jarvis and stuff is more of a random pattern of dots, kind of placed here and there to get a little more realistic looking kind of gradients and stuff. And that's the difference. And when you zoom into the difference, you can kind of see the difference. Some people really like one, others like the other, and it's kind of personal preference.
Absolutely. And I mean, for anyone who was originally who's familiar with our previous software, Job Control, there was even a photo optimized mode directly in there. It's not something that I ever really got to play with, but I know that, again, to your point, Dave, there is a certain amount of it that is technique, and then a certain amount of it that is also just personal preference. Some people like a darker photo, lighter photo. It depends on the material, of course, all of that sort of stuff. This is a question really quickly for Tim. So question from Dan echoing Joey's question. Could you tell us what lens is being used in the 400, and if you have a personal preference for the lens when doing photo engraving?
Right. So right now I'm using a 2-inch lens for this machine. I typically prefer the 2-inch lens just because of how versatile it is. It's great for cutting, great for engraving. So if you're using both applications, I like to stick with the 2-inch. I have ran some tests with the 2.5 and the 1.5, and I found that my results were just a bit better with the 2-inch. So I'm gonna stick with the 2-inch.
That's really interesting. I initially would have thought the 1.5, but I'm glad to hear that, actually.
Yeah.
So we were talking about the ability to sort of edit the process mode, or the gosh, I'm losing the term, but to be able to edit the way that the material is being marked. Is that something that you could show us really quickly in Ruby?
Oh, definitely, definitely. So within the actual material settings, so right here on the right side of the screen, while I'm in the preparing tab, what I can go through is this list over here of all of my power and speed settings, my DPI, my air assist, and then at the very, very bottom, we'll find dithering. And when I press on the drop down, I have 4 options to choose from. You could also just simply choose none. I also found that ordered looks just a bit more composed and set in place. I don't mind the Stucky and Floyd, but I will tend to just navigate towards ordered. I've always used ordered regardless. I find that it just comes out looking a bit better. Everything is sort of placed in these very manageable square sizes, and the laser works really well like that.
Awesome. As you say too, I mean, even you mentioned, right, some of it is just going to be that personal preference as to like how you like it when something comes out. I'm still kind of smiling to myself because Dave very rightly pointed out earlier on that wood is very, very generous when it comes to doing photo engraving, and I laugh because the only good video that we have to show of me doing photo engraving is one of Wayne Gretzky on wood, and there's a reason for that. So 4 Unique Dog, I love that username, by the way. 4 Unique Dogs mentions too that it is worthwhile also if you are using Corel, for example. I mean, I'm very much an advocate for use whatever you have to hand. So even if you have Inkscape, let's say, for example, there is going to be a certain amount of editing, a certain amount of pre-preparation that you can do there. But definitely don't feel like a piece of software is going to limit you in terms of doing anything with a laser. Realistically, at the end of the day, use whatever you have, experiment, try different things, and there are certainly some photo editing softwares in this case. There are certain softwares that are perhaps specifically suited to doing a certain thing, but there's nothing to be said that yours can't get it done. It just might be a little bit of a workaround that you have to find. Or again, I always recommend check out YouTube. We have great tutorials on a lot of this stuff, even on using both CorelDRAW and Corel Photo Paint for getting something done. So a really quick question then back over to Dave, really fast. I want to kind of come back to when I was just asking Tim in terms of your particular, preferences for photo engraving, not only lens, but then also if you have a particular machine or a particular, way of going about it, a particular material, anything like that. If you're going to show off photo engraving to somebody in a showroom, what is your go-to?
When it comes to a photograph, I mean, there's a lot of variables involved. I mean, my favorite lens is actually, believe it or not, based on the material. As Tim just found, the 2-inch lens is working best on anodized aluminum. And the scientific reason for that is because of how much laser power he's using. A 1.5-inch lens has a smaller beam diameter, which is a good thing on photographs for the most part. But because he has so much laser power, it's far more difficult to control because your power density, or the amount of energy that you have, is now shrunk down almost, a third smaller than the 2-inch lens. So you have more energy in a smaller spot, which actually produces more intensity. And that more intensity is harder to control with higher laser power. So if you're really running the same laser machine with, say, a 20, 30, or 40, 50 watt, lower wattage, you're going to find that the 1.5 is going to work better. Straight, flat materials, you're going to find that 1.5 is always going to produce a better photograph, unless, for example, you're doing something like anodized aluminum with a very high wattage laser, like you see here. If you're doing something like woods or some type of plastics and stuff, the 1.5 being a smaller beam diameter is going to effectively give you a better photograph. But again, it's harder to control because that same amount of energy, it's like a bigger magnifying glass with a spot in the sun. You got more energy at a smaller spot. That energy is more difficult to control if you have more energy you're putting into it. And that's what it comes down to. We're burning material, and we're just trying to control this heat to basically do our bidding, or do exactly what we want it to do. And so in most cases, I will find a 1.5 is going to produce a slightly better photograph depending on the material. If there's any deviation in the material, you're etching, curved, warped wood, or for a slate or something with a lot of deviation, a 2-inch is my favorite overall. for more consistency. If you don't have a 1.5, it's not necessary because the 2 does an absolutely stunning job. And so again, it comes down to personal preference. It comes down to material, total wattage that you have, and then just some experimentation as well.
So as a quick aside, so one thing I have to ask you really fast, what is the material on which the 4-inch or clearance lens is your preference? Because now I'm really curious.
Well, I would not be doing photographs.
No.
It's funny, is in my photo seminar that I posted on our YouTube channel on Trotec Laser USA, I go in and actually show the same photograph engraved on anodized aluminum with a 1.5, 2, 2.5, and 4. So you see exactly what that same photograph is going to look like on all 4 lenses side by side. The 4-inch lens and the 2.5, they're good lens for some applications when you need more clearance, when you need more tolerance. Tolerance is ideal when it comes to deviation, focal deviation. Low quality on photographs is going to happen when you use those longer lenses. So they're not great for photographs. But there are times when we've wanted to etch a photograph on something like a skateboard deck, which has a lot of deviation to it. And oh, there you go, perfect. And you can really see the difference. And so the 4-inch lens and the 2.5, as you see, do produce an actual photograph, but you can truly see on the 1.5, and this was all done with a lower wattage. Lower wattage lasers are going to produce an effect. I mean, I was doing this with an 80 watt versus 120, and as you can see, the clarity and brightness and sharpness on a 1.5 is far brighter and sharper on anodized aluminum than you would see on using the 2.0-inch lens. But as you can see, the 2-inch lens is good, and some people like the 2-inch better because it's got a little bit more shading and stuff like that onto it. Where the 2.5 and the 4, you can see a lot of those details start to go away. The brightness starts to go away. 2.5 is okay, but now the 4-inch lens is kind of faded because, again, your beam diameter, as you can see here, is massively large. You're talking 3 to 4 times the beam diameter, and it's like trying to do a photograph with a sharpened pencil versus a crayon. That's really the difference between lenses.
That's a really great analogy. That's very, very good. This is one I want to throw over to Tim, but I'll ask the both of you. Dave, you were talking about working on, like, let's say a warped material or a tricky material, because Tim and I have been talking about doing a rotary webinar coming up soon. I have somebody here asking Tim if you can do photo engraving on wine glasses or like glass and acrylic in general. I don't know if that's anything you've ever tried, but I assume it is doable. Yeah.
Absolutely. Glass is more tricky. Yeah, so I mean, I have done glass, but again, you're not going to get. And when it comes to glass, I do start recommending some of the rendering softwares that convert your graphic. Like PhotoGrave, OneTouch Photo, Laser Photo Plus, because they literally take a photograph and turn it to a dot pattern that's specific for a material. They cost a little bit more money, but they take the complexity out of it. I actually developed the OneTouch Photo. And what it does is that you basically say this photo needs to go on glass, and then it turns it to a dot or dither pattern specifically for a material.
Wow.
Taking all the complexity away from it. Yes, they cost several $100s, but if you're doing a lot of photographs, it may be something you at least do a downloadable trial to run those. And so it takes some of the complexity out. Trying to do photographs with like a halftone on glass can be tricky, but it is possible. Depends on the type of glass, the type of focus. Something like a wine glass is tricky because of the curvature. If you get curvature in both directions, it can be more difficult. If it's decent in a cylinder based, and then you're going to have more luck with it because your focus stays consistent. Because glass tends to chip and flake a lot if it doesn't stay in focus. True.
Wine glasses and glass in general is probably another one up there with some of the most tricky materials, but certainly doable with a bit of practice.
Agreed.
I have a question here from Eric that I want to give to Tim because Tim is our principal trainer here in Canada. So Eric mentions that he's a newbie, and since he started, he was told to use job control and not to use Ruby, but in this case, we're using Ruby. So, what would be your recommendation? I mean, at this point, when you're talking to a new laser user, do you recommend one over the other, or do you find that one is easier to use than the other? I mean, what is your go-to, not just for photo engraving, but just in general? What would be your recommendation for Eric?
Right. I would say over time, transitioning over to Ruby would just be the ideal choice. And just because since I've started working here in February, I've been introduced to both softwares. I've had to work with both of them as well. And over time, I found that when it comes to making something, at least within our office, I find that using Ruby is just a bit more universal and a bit easier to use as well. I find that I spend much less time going back and forth between my design software and Ruby. Because if I see that I need to make a small change within Ruby, I just make it there in Ruby. I don't have to go back and forth. I'm also finding that there are much less problems when it comes to Ruby as well. With job control, since it runs on a printer driver program, this means you need a printer driver installed in your computer. If something ever goes wrong with that, you have to go back and forth to reinstall it as well. With Ruby, we have less of those connectivity issues between the printer driver and the machine. Because with job control, you're going from machine to printer driver to job control. And with Ruby, you're going from Ruby to machine. So it's a bit more effective in workflow. It is a bit different. I do understand that, but just like with any other software, there does come a bit of a learning curve. But the learning curve with Ruby was really great and simple. Everything is laid out as 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're done. I personally enjoy Ruby a bit more.
I agree.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, Dave. I mean, anything you'd like to add to that? I'm curious of your input as well.
Yeah, I've used, of course, both, and I was originally trained on job control. So, I mean, job control still has a few minor little features and stuff that are not available on Ruby. And so those out there that are still using job control that are hesitating. The nice thing, too, is that if you have an older machine, you can install both. And so you can jump back and forth and start familiarizing yourself with both softwares. And so this way you can kind of use the best of both worlds. And as the final few features come into Ruby, you're going to find yourself using Ruby more and more, just because, as Tim said, it's more user-friendly. You can make edits on the fly. It just gives you so much more control over the operation of your laser system already on it without going back and forth through that. The other thing that got me on job control is waiting. Every time you hit print, you had to go through that Windows job spooler, which took so much time. I can go from a file on my desktop, drag it into Ruby, and be operational on the laser system in under 10 seconds. With job control, that was minutes every time you needed to send a new file. So the efficiency on Ruby far exceeds the job control software.
Absolutely, and I think it's something that the both of you touched on a little bit, but I would just like to mention on behalf of every tech service person working at Trotec, and they may be some of the hardest working people at Trotec. When we are working with, as Tim said, a print driver, basically, it's a printer driver that works the same as any other printer driver. Any Windows update can suddenly throw job control into a tailspin for a matter of days while we figure out, what did they change? So that is something that not having that same, because Ruby is, as you say, run locally right there, in your internet browser, it just makes everything so much simpler and straight away. A quick question from Daniel. I'll ask you this, Dave. I think I may know the answer, but I'm interested to hear what you say. Best way to cleanly drill holes on an aluminum sheet in your experience?
Okay, that's an interesting question. Not with the
It's
laser,
out of left field, but it's a good one. No, sir, that's the thing. Yeah.
To wake me up, you can use my custom.
I mean,
Hey Samuel,
what?
when you want me to set that up,
That's all good.
For drilling holes, I would use. Typically, you want to have a clean. Wow, my Alexa's for some reason.
So helpful until they're not helpful.
Right, and then they like to butt into streaming, definitely. So when it comes to it, I like to clamp it down, put it under an actual drill press, and then bring the actual drill press down. Don't use like the hand drills, because you're going to get angles, you're going to get a lot of burrs and stuff like that if you can. If not, you want to get it kind of clean and straight using a very high-grade drill bit so that you get a nice, straight, clean hole. Because when you're going through something like aluminum, in addition to clamping it on both sides, or on top of like a piece of wood and then going through it into that wood so that you don't flex or bend or cause actually a warping into the soft aluminum.
Makes perfect sense. One little tip that was mentioned here in the chat too, I believe it was Dan maybe who mentioned it, that using, oh no, I apologize. So yeah, using your laser in advance to mark where you'd like the holes, and then bringing that over to the drill press or something like that is a cool kind of little tip that you can do.
That's a great tip. That's a great tip. I like it.
Yeah, absolutely. Joey, quick question. So I was going to write it here in chat, but I'll mention it also. Ruby is still available from our website. So you can visit troteclaser.com. I believe ruby.troteclaser.com will still work as a shortcut, but you can visit troteclaser.com, visit the software page there, and you can find Ruby. It's still available for free download if you have a Trotec machine, but you don't have Ruby yet. 100% recommend check it out. We recently, new features keep rolling out for it. You'll keep hearing about them, and I will always recommend if there's something you'd like to see added to Ruby. I mean, Dave even mentioned it himself. Certainly there are things that Job Control can do that Ruby still hasn't integrated. Let us know, please. There's a button right in Ruby to submit, suggestions and things like that, and they are always watching that stuff to find out, what are the functionalities that customers want to see more than anything else. Right now, Ruby is only available for Trotec machines, but if you would like to see it in action and see why we love it so much, I'd recommend, certainly come and visit Dave or Tim or myself or whoever at a local Trotec near you and check out a demo. So really quick, one last question maybe here I'll throw out there. So 48 Dogs, and I'm not just asking the question as an excuse to say the username again, mentions their preference for using glass with a particular lens and a low DPI. And I thought, a quick shout out also to Gary for a really, really cool application. I would love to see more of that, Gary, to be honest. But I was curious, both Dave first maybe, and then I'll go over to Tim. If you guys, when it comes to marking glass, do you have any tips or tricks, not necessarily just for photo engraving, but for, in general, whether it's a lens, whether it's a DPI, application tips, all that sort of stuff?
Glass is a tricky one, as you say. I mean, running a lower DPI in a photo is a good idea in a lot of cases. I have found that it is an effective solution to get a little bit better photo, because lower DPI spreads the pulses across, and you're going to get less effect. The key thing with etching glass is making sure it's as flat as possible. If it's on a rotary, making sure it's a cylinder and not more of a spherical type shape. Or you angle your rotary up if you can to compensate for as much angle. If you go too large, it's going to give you more problematic chipping and flaking. Also, a misconception in the industry in glass is the cheaper the glass, the better the engraving quality. That is a misconception that I have proven incorrectly, and that came from the sand carving and sandblasting industry, where it was true. With lasers, the better the glass quality, you go with like a sodium line glass is okay, but if you go into like titanium crystal, it's stunning. It can handle more deviation of focus. It produces a better photograph. So if you ever want to do like a wine glass, go buy titanium crystal glass. It's not too expensive. You can typically pick it up at a lot of places, and you're going to find the engraving quality, photograph quality is stunning. The quality is better. You almost get no chipping or flaking. So higher quality tends to produce a better effect.
So can I ask you a follow-up question then really quick, Dan? And I do still want to, or Dave, sorry, I'm reading chat as well. Before I go over to Tim, so I had actually heard that before, and I've made that mistake before then in terms of, going to the dollar store and buying cheap mason jars, say, for example, to do photo engraving. The practice that I do marking a cheap piece of glass, will I be able to transfer that experience in those settings, let's say 1-to-1 to a nicer sheet of glass, or am I basically starting kind of back from square one again? Just like, a high quality acrylic, let's say, versus a low quality acrylic.
No, settings are going to be pretty comparable. I mean, there may be a minor tweak. It depends. I mean, there's, and so a lot of your settings will be comparable. I mean, the key is the quality of the glass. I mean, cheap glass is made quickly. It's heated up. It's formed as quick as possible. It's cooled down quicker. So you get a lot of imperfections into it. And this is why we have a lot of problems when processing glass. So a higher quality glass is heated up. It's a lot more of a long process to actually produce it. So you get a lot more consistency, less flaking, less chipping, less problematic. And that's really different. Power and speed settings are pretty consistent among most types, but there may be some variation. I do suggest running a test because there's so many versions of it out there. But in most cases, your settings are pretty close.
Absolutely. And then sort of, again, I did want to ask Tim, anything you could add in terms of, like, in your experience for glass marking in particular, any little tips or tricks or things you picked up along the way, stuff you like to do?
Well, I like to speak on the side of safety because glass is very dangerous to work with, extremely dangerous. When you're engraving glass, you're not really engraving it, you're sort of shattering little particles of it. So a lower DPI is typically the best way to go, at least in the way I see it, just because you're concentrating less dots per inch and you're having less dots being fired at one spot. And I think that is usually the best way to go about it. I think that's fine. I've experimented with it. I tried using a 4-inch lens for a rounded wine bottle. Like Dave mentioned, the type of glass is vastly important. So lead-based glass on a CO2 laser, no go, will not do much. Same thing goes for a silica-based glass as well. It's almost like a heat-resistant glass. It's silicone-based. So engraving on that type of glass is very difficult and will typically only really shatter away the glass and not have it look as great. So titanium crystal glass is the best result. The clearer the glass quality when it's made, the better the engraving quality you're going to be getting. But always try to stay on the side of safety when you're done the engraving on glass. Don't try to touch it with your fingers. I know it's like I do it right away when I try to pick something up. I try to rub my finger over it. Don't do that with glass. Big mistake.
I've done that.
Another thing I want to throw in there for you, Tim, is when you do a lot of glass, it produces a lot of abrasive particles. And those abrasive particles get into your belts, and you want to wipe it down because it will severely reduce the lifespan of your motion system of your laser if you're doing it a lot and not cleaning it, because it acts like sandpaper on everything. So be very careful from a safety standpoint, and also for the lifespan of your laser. If you're doing a lot of glass, make sure you clean up properly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will. So really quickly, I wanted to throw this over to Dave. We're just at the top of the hour here, everyone. I know both Dave and Tim are very, very busy guys, so I can't keep them for too long. But I'm curious, Dave, do you know if borosilicate glass is okay to engrave? If it's safe? Ruma mentions that they'd heard that it's actually not safe for laser.
No, it works just fine. Borosilicate is just a different form of glass. It's a lot more pure. Basically, the type of glass that's on the surface of your cell phone. It's the Gorilla Glass you actually see. It's a Pyrex type glass. And so basically it's a more pure form of glass. It can handle heat at much higher rates. I do find that when I engrave it, I get almost a molded look instead of a fractured look. And it does produce a really neat look. It's very classy, it's clean, but it's not as high a contrast. So there's no damage to your laser. It's not going to cause any issues, but you will get a different effect. And in a lot of cases, I think it is desirable. I would suggest giving it a try.
Yep.
Awesome. I mean, with that, as I say, I think we will probably call it there, everyone. I'm sorry to, I'd really like to keep going, to be honest. Obviously, there's a lot more that we could talk about. I think, first and foremost, a huge thank you to everybody who joined us today in chat. Obviously, a huge thank you to both Tim and Dave for your time today. Getting the insights from you guys is always super, super helpful. Tim, thank you again for demoing the laser for us. I know it's really tough to talk and demo at the same time. So a huge hats off to you as always.
Thank you.
I will let you guys know ahead of sort of our webinar next week. We're going to be doing a really, really cool webinar with our team from Trotec Laser Germany, TLAD we call them. They have done a lot of really, really cool stuff, particularly with our fiber machines, our sort of our galvo engraving machines, and in terms of really interesting installations, custom installations of those machines. Definitely not one to miss. I think it's going to be a really, really great webinar. We're going to get to talk to them about what it is that they do. They've got a quick yes, the Trotec Laser Automation Division. Thank you, Lev. I always forget right in the moment. But really a good one to check out, I think, and it'll give you another sort of side to what's possible with Trotec lasers that we don't often get to talk about, but it's definitely a core of particularly with our galvos, what's possible. We also have right now, we're coming up to a road tour in Western Canada. So for those customers who are out there in Saskatchewan or Manitoba, I believe it is on the week of July the 4th to the 7th, something like that. I will take a quick look at my calendar here. 4th to the 8th, I believe. Our salesperson Renee is going to be out there in the laser van, touring around, visiting customers, doing demonstrations, all that sort of stuff. So although it mentions Regina, Saskatoon, Winnipeg there on the banner, he'll be visiting customers all across the two provinces. If you'd like him to visit you, we're going to be putting up a post here on our Instagram later today that'll have a link to the sign up. Please check it out or shoot us an email, youtube@troteclaser.ca, and we pass along the registration for you, and we'll have Renee get in touch with you. I think definitely a really cool opportunity and not one to miss out on. So, oh, pardon me. Yes, Doug is exactly right. So I apologize. Next week on Friday is Canada Day. So it'll be Thursday next week. Sorry. Thank you, Doug. That's a really good catch. I would have been really disappointed if I'd fallen that one. Last but not least, certainly, I want to toss it over to Dave. Dave, is there anything you'd like to recommend that people check out? Anything you've got coming up, or that Trotec US has coming up that we'd really love for our audience to take a look at?
I have a couple new, really kind of fun and exciting videos that I just finished producing that I have put that will be posted on our Trotec Laser USA YouTube channel. So keep up with that if you want to keep up with current events and stuff. I don't have any current seminars coming up except for live. I will be at the GPX show in New Jersey coming up next month. So if you want to come there and see me live with my current seminar that I'm producing, that is it's not online yet, but it is it will be done live. So you definitely come and see me there.
Cool.
Other than that, when it comes to photographs, I do suggest also maybe taking a look at my photo engraving seminar on processing laser photographs on our Trotec Laser USA YouTube channel. It really is more informative. It goes into the nitty gritty of all the details of sizing, photo editing, software, all the different ins and outs of lenses and stuff like that. So if you really want to dive into this topic and know every little bit of detail, that's a great one to take a look at.
Seconded, 100%. I second that recommendation. There are no greater Trotec videos on the platform than the ones that Dave puts together, and the fact that we have just shamelessly borrowed them time and again, I think speaks to that. The guy is an absolute just font of information. You could not do better.
I appreciate that, John.
I honestly, I feel so spoiled to get to stream with you guys each week. Both Tim and Dave. Again, huge thanks to you guys for joining me this week. A huge thank you again to everybody in chat. I hope you had a great time. If you're seeing this later on YouTube, I mean, I always love if you can like and subscribe, whether it's Trotec USA, Trotec Canada. There's always good stuff coming out. We look forward to another great stream next week on Thursday, in this case, Thursday, June 30th, at the same time, I believe. Well, you'll see it coming out. I don't want to stumble over myself here again and give the wrong time, but you'll see it coming out at 10 a.m. Thank you, Lev. Thank you. You guys would not believe how often, just like I've closed down a stream and then realized at the last moment that I've said like 11 a.m. instead of 12 a.m. or something. Like, no. But yes, always a huge thank you to everybody who's watching, everyone who's joined us. We will see you again next week for